History is not just a collection of dates and names we memorize, it's a vast, shadowy tapestry woven with stories that have slipped through the cracks of time. Some of the most extraordinary tales, the ones that once shaped empires and whispered through the ages, have faded into obscurity, waiting to be rediscovered. Picture this: mighty cities swallowed by jungles, advanced technologies lost to the sands, and heroes whose deeds became myths so grand we struggle to believe they were ever real. These aren't just footnotes, they're the echoes of civilizations that dared to dream, to conquer, to vanish without a trace. And today, we're pulling back the curtain on 30 of these forgotten legends, each one a puzzle begging to be solved. What if I told you that some of history's most breathtaking achievements were erased not by cataclysm or war, but by the slow march of time? That there are entire cultures, inventions, and even sciences that once thrived, only to disappear as if they were never there. These lost legends blur the line between myth and reality, teasing us with fragments: a cryptic inscription, a half-buried ruin, a story passed down through generations until it becomes something between history and fairy tale. But behind every legend lies a kernel of truth, a real people, a real place, a real moment that changed the world before vanishing into the dark. This is a journey into the unknown where every step reveals something astonishing. We'll walk the streets of cities that time forgot, decipher the secrets of artifacts that defy explanation, and meet the figures who became larger than life, then slipped into obscurity. From the sunken marvels of forgotten seafarers to the whispered rituals of civilizations that left no written record, these are the stories that history almost erased. And the most thrilling part, some of these legends might still hold answers, waiting for the right explorer, the right clue to bring them back into the light. So if you're ready to uncover the mysteries that shaped our world without us even knowing, then let's begin. The past is calling, and it has secrets to share. The legend of Atlantis begins with a whisper, not from some dusty scroll, but from the mind of a philosopher who shaped the very way we think. Plato first described this fabled island in his dialogues 2,500 years ago, painting a picture so vivid, so tantalizing, that we've been searching for it ever since. According to him, Atlantis was a mighty empire of vast wealth and unimaginable power, with towering palaces of gold, advanced engineering that defied the era, and a military so formidable they nearly conquered the ancient world. But then, in a single night of fire and flood, the entire civilization vanished beneath the waves, punished by the gods for its arrogance. Was it a cautionary tale? A lost chapter of history, or something stranger? Theories about Atlantis's real-world counterpart stretch across the globe like pieces of a shattered mirror. Some point to the volcanic island of Thura, now Santorini, where a cataclysmic eruption around 1600 BCE obliterated the Minoan civilization. The parallels are eerie: a thriving maritime culture, sophisticated architecture, and a sudden, violent end that could have inspired Plato's story. Others argue Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, perhaps in the Azores or even Antarctica, swallowed by shifting continents or rising seas. Then there are those who believe the city wasn't just advanced, it was otherworldly, harnessing technologies we still don't understand, leaving behind only cryptic clues in ancient texts. What keeps archaeologists awake at night isn't just the question of where Atlantis was, but what it was. Imagine a city with energy systems beyond steam or muscle, buildings constructed from materials unknown to modern science, or knowledge of astronomy so precise it rivals our own. The idea that an entire civilization could rise, flourish, and vanish without leaving a definitive trace is both thrilling and humbling. It forces us to ask how much of history's greatest achievements have been erased. How many other Atlantises are still waiting, hidden in plain sight or buried under centuries of silt and skepticism? And then there's the drama of its downfall, a spectacle that's fueled imaginations for millennia. Picture it: earthquakes splitting the earth, tsunamis swallowing golden spires, molten rock raining from the sky as the sea itself rises to reclaim the land. Whether Atlantis was a real place or a brilliant allegory, its legacy endures because it touches something primal in us, the fear of losing everything. The allure of forgotten glory, the nagging suspicion that our own cities, our own technologies, might one day be little more than whispers in the dark. So the search continues, not just for ruins, but for the truth behind the legend, a truth that might rewrite history itself. The hanging gardens of Babylon dangle in history like an illusion, so vividly described, yet so frustratingly absent from the ground beneath our feet. Ancient writers gushed over them, tiered terraces bursting with exotic plants, waterfalls cascading down stone walls, a jungle paradise built in the heart of the Mesopotamian desert. Herodotus, often called the father of history, painted them as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, a testament to human ingenuity. But here's the twist: modern archaeologists haven't found a single brick, seed, or inscription that definitively proves they existed. So were they real, or just the ancient world's most persuasive mirage? Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon's most famous king, sits at the center of the mystery. The story goes that he built the gardens around 600 BCE to soothe his homesick wife, a princess from the lush mountains of Media. Babylon's flat, arid landscape must have felt like a prison to her, so the king supposedly engineered an artificial mountain of greenery, complete with a complex irrigation system drawing water from the Euphrates. It's a romantic tale, but there's a glaring hole. Nebuchadnezzar's own extensive records mention palaces, temples, even city walls, but not a word about these legendary gardens. Then there's the engineering puzzle. Creating a self-sustaining oasis in a desert would have required technology centuries ahead of its time. Picture this: water lifted from the river through an ingenious system of screws, pulleys, and aqueducts, then channeled through a network of pipes to keep the soil moist under the scorching sun. The Babylonians were master builders. Their ziggurats soared, their canals crisscrossed the land, but no physical trace of this horticultural masterpiece has ever surfaced. Not a single shard of pottery, not one foundation stone. Even the famous Ishtar Gate, another of Nebuchadnezzar's projects, left behind dazzling blue tiles. Why would the gardens vanish without a whisper? Some scholars argue the gardens weren't in Babylon at all, but in Nineveh, capital of the rival Assyrian Empire. A Babylonian priest writing centuries later might have mixed up the cities, transferring the glory of Assyrian King Sennacherib's well-documented gardens to his own homeland. Sennacherib's palace inscriptions boast of an elaborate garden like Mount Amanus, complete with bronze water screws and exotic trees, details eerily similar to Herodotus's account. Could patriotic pride have rewritten history, stealing Nineveh's marvel and gifting it to Babylon? The lack of evidence hasn't stopped explorers from searching. In the 19th century, German archaeologist Robert Koldewey thought he'd found the garden's foundations, a peculiar vaulted structure with what looked like wells. But his theory crumbled under scrutiny. The site was more likely a storeroom. Even today, satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar scan the ruins of Babylon, hunting for clues. Every empty-handed dig deepens the mystery. How could something so grand leave no trace? Perhaps the gardens were always more metaphor than masonry. Ancient texts loved to blur the line between achievement and allegory. A king's power wasn't just measured in battles won, but in his ability to tame nature itself, to make rivers climb and deserts bloom. The Hanging Gardens might have been the ultimate propaganda, a symbol of Babylon's dominance over earth and water. Or maybe, just maybe, they're still buried, waiting for some sharp-eyed excavator to brush away the dust and reveal the truth. Until then, they hang suspended between history and myth, as elusive as the scent of their long-faded flowers. Imagine a single building holding the sum of human knowledge, every philosophy, every scientific theory, every epic poem, all gathered under one roof. That was the legendary Library of Alexandria, a beacon of learning so vast, its destruction still haunts us 2,000 years later. Founded in the 3rd century BCE under Ptolemaic rule, this wasn't just a collection of scrolls, it was the intellectual heartbeat of the ancient world. Scholars from every corner of the Mediterranean flocked here, drawn by its promise. If a text existed, the library would acquire it. Ships docking in Alexandria's harbor were searched not for contraband but for books. Any scroll found was confiscated, copied by the library's scribes, and only then returned, if at all. The result, a treasure trove said to hold over 500,000 works, from Euclid's geometry to lost plays of Sophocles. Then came the fire or fires. The most famous blaze, the one etched into popular memory, occurred during Julius Caesar's civil war in 48 BCE. Trapped in Alexandria's harbor, Caesar ordered his men to burn the enemy fleet. Flames spread to the docks, then reportedly leaped to the library itself, consuming untold thousands of irreplaceable scrolls. But here's the twist: the library may have survived this catastrophe, only to perish later in smaller, equally devastating attacks. Centuries after Caesar, another fire erupted during Emperor Aurelian's war against Queen Zenobia in the 200 CE. Then came Christian riots in the 4th century, targeting pagan knowledge, and finally, the Arab conquest in the 7th century, though historians still debate whether Caliph Omar truly ordered the burning of the books. The tragedy isn't just the loss of one library, it's death by 1,000 cuts, a slow unraveling of humanity's collective memory. Consider what vanished in those flames. Aristotle himself supposedly sent his personal manuscripts to Alexandria. His dialogues, described as more poetic than Plato's, are gone forever. The library held early histories of Carthage, erased by Rome's vengeance, and Babylonian astronomical texts detailing eclipses we can no longer verify. Even the works of Hypatia, the brilliant mathematician and philosopher, were reduced to ashes along with her life. The true scale of the loss is unimaginable, not just individual texts, but entire fields of study, alternative paths of scientific inquiry, voices from marginalized cultures that history would otherwise never hear. Yet whispers of the library's holdings persist. Some scholars believe fragments survived, smuggled out by fleeing scholars or hidden in private collections. A handful of Aristotle's works, like the Poetics, resurfaced centuries later in Byzantine monasteries, hinting at what else might lie undiscovered. The Villa of the Papyri in Herculaneum, buried by Mount Vesuvius, yielded carbonized scrolls that modern technology is painstakingly unraveling. Could other caches still exist, tucked away in desert caves or beneath medieval churches? The hope lingers because every recovered line is a thread reconnecting us to that vanished world of ideas. The Library of Alexandria's greatest lesson might be this: knowledge is fragile. It can be erased not just by flame, but by neglect, by ideology, by the simple passage of time. Its ghost reminds us that every scroll we preserve, every story we retell, is a defiance of that darkness, a vow to keep the flame of understanding alive, no matter how strong the winds of history blow against it. Gold has a way of warping history, turning men into legends and legends into obsessions. Few myths embody this more than El Dorado and the City of Z, twin tales of treasure that drove explorers to madness and ruin. The first began with a whisper among Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century. A king so rich he coated his body in gold dust during sacred ceremonies, then washed it away in a lake shimmering with offerings. El Dorado wasn't just a place, it was a man, a ritual, a dream of endless wealth. The second legend, born centuries later, lured British adventurer Percy Fawcett into the Amazon's green hell, convinced a lost metropolis older than the Incas, grander than Rome, lay hidden beneath the vines. Both stories promised unimaginable riches, both ended in swallowed expeditions and whispered curses. The irony of El Dorado is that it started with a kernel of truth. The Muisca people of Colombia really did have a tradition where their leader, covered in gold dust, paddled to the center of Lake Guatavita and tossed jewels into the water as offerings to the gods. Spanish invaders twisted this sacred rite into a fever dream of cities paved with gold, sending armies hacking through jungles, draining lakes, and slaughtering natives for clues. Gonzalo Pizarro led 6,000 men into the Amazon in 1541, only to emerge 2 years later with a handful of starving survivors, their armor rusted, their pockets empty. Walter Raleigh mounted 2 expeditions, even publishing fanciful maps to woo investors. His final voyage ended with his son dead in a skirmish and his own head on the chopping block back in England. The true tragedy: Lake Guatavita was filled with gold, but centuries of reckless dredging scattered most of it into the mud. The conquistadors were so busy chasing a myth, they destroyed the real treasure in front of them. Percy Fawcett's quest for the city of Z, though born in the 20th century, followed the same doomed pattern. A seasoned explorer, Fawcett became obsessed with a theory: the Amazon, long dismissed as a green desert incapable of sustaining advanced civilizations, had once housed a sprawling golden city. He'd pieced together clues from colonial manuscripts, indigenous tales, and his own expeditions, where he'd found strange pottery and earthworks eerily aligned with celestial patterns. In 1925, Fawcett ventured deep into Brazil's Mato Grosso with his son and a friend, armed with a cryptic last letter: "You need have no fear of failure." They vanished without a trace. The jungle swallowed them whole, sparking a century of wild speculation. Had they been killed by tribes, stumbled upon a secret? Over 100 subsequent searchers died trying to solve the mystery, earning the region its grim nickname, the Green Hell. What makes these legends endure isn't just the gold, but what they reveal about human nature. El Dorado became a mirror for Spanish greed, a cautionary tale of how lust for wealth can blind even the most cunning minds. The city of Z, though rooted in slightly nobler ambitions, Fawcett genuinely believed he'd rewrite history, still speaks to our willingness to vanish into the unknown for a glimmer of glory. Modern archaeologists have since uncovered startling truths. The Amazon did host complex societies like the Cuhucugu settlements with their causeways and plazas, eerily close to where Fawcett disappeared. But these discoveries came too late for the seekers, their bones long since claimed by the same earth that guarded their obsessions. Perhaps the real treasure was never gold at all, but the stories we tell about those who dared to chase it. El Dorado and Z live on because they're not just about places, they're about the moment hope tips into mania, when the map ends but the mind keeps going. Even now, satellites scan the Amazon for geometric shadows, and treasure hunters sift riverbeds for Muisca gold. The jungles and lakes keep their secrets, but the legends, those they let us carry home. Something was wrong before the first ship even reached shore. In 1587, a group of English settlers, men, women, and children, stepped onto Roanoke Island off the coast of what's now North Carolina, their clothes stiff with salt spray, their eyes wide with the promise of a new world. They were led by John White, an artist-turned-governor who documented their arrival with careful sketches. Timber-framed houses rising between the pines, native Croatoans watching curiously from the tree line. Then White sailed back to England for supplies, delayed by war with Spain. When he returned 3 years later, the entire colony had vanished, no bodies. No battle scars, just a single word carved into a wooden post, Croatoan. That cryptic clue would ignite 4 centuries of speculation, turning Roanoke into America's oldest ghost story. Theories spiral in every direction, each more haunting than the last. The most plausible suggests the settlers assimilated with the nearby Croatoan tribe after famine or conflict made survival impossible. Jamestown colonists decades later heard whispers of white-skinned people living among natives to the south, and some Croatoan descendants today bear European features and last names like Dial or Hyde. But darker possibilities linger. Spanish records mention a massacre of English intruders around that time, though no bodies were ever found on Roanoke. Then there's the eerie coincidence of the vanishing coinciding with a historic drought. Tree rings show it was the worst dry spell in 800 years. Starvation could have driven desperate acts, cannibalism, scattered groups wandering until the wilderness swallowed them whole. Supernatural explanations cling stubbornly to the legend. Local lore speaks of pale figures flickering between the trees at dusk, their clothes oddly antiquated. Some point to Dare County's Devil's Tramping Ground, a barren circle where nothing grows, said to be the site of a bloody confrontation between settlers and spirits. Even the name Croatoan took on a cult weight. Occultists in the 1920s claimed it invoked a demon, and Lovecraft wove it into his mythos as a cursed word. The truth, the Croatoans were real people, later known as the Lumbee, and their oral histories hold tantalizing gaps where Roanoke settlers might have slipped in. Modern science has sharpened the hunt. DNA projects scour Lumbee lineages for European markers, while ground-penetrating radar peers beneath the soil for traces of a hurried departure. In 2020, archaeologists uncovered fragments of English pottery mixed with Croatoan artifacts 50 miles inland, a trail of breadcrumbs leading away from the coast. The most heartbreaking clue, John White's own lost watercolors recovered centuries later, show settlers and natives sharing meals peacefully. Perhaps the answer isn't a tragedy, but a quiet merging of worlds rewritten by time into a mystery. Roanoke echoes in other vanishings, the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers who disappeared in 1900, leaving behind a single eerie log entry. The Mary Celeste found adrift with dinner still warm on the table. These stories grip us because they reject closure, leaving room for our darkest what-ifs. The settlers didn't just disappear, they became shadows we chase, reminders that history isn't a sealed book but a puzzle missing half its pieces. Every scratched arrowhead, every strand of DNA whispers, keep looking. The past is still out there, hiding in plain sight. Even the most cryptic manuscripts usually surrender their secrets eventually, but not this one. The Voynich Manuscript is a book that refuses to be read, a 200-page puzzle written in a script no one recognizes, filled with illustrations of plants that don't exist and celestial charts that defy known astronomy. Since its discovery in 1912 by antique book dealer Wilfred Voynich, it's become the ultimate intellectual lockpick, tempting and taunting everyone from wartime codebreakers to modern AI algorithms. Flip through its vellum pages and you'll find delicate drawings of bulbous roots and spiked leaves labeled in looping, alien characters. Turn further, and there are nude women bathing in green liquid, zodiac wheels with unfamiliar constellations, and endless paragraphs of text that look almost familiar, yet remain stubbornly meaningless. Theories about its origins split into three camps, each wilder than the last. Some insist it's an elaborate Renaissance hoax, crafted to swindle a wealthy patron out of his gold. The bizarre plant's artistic license, the nonsense text, random scribbles to mimic real language, but radiocarbon dating complicates this. The vellum was made between 1404 and 1438, and the ink matches 15th century recipes. Why would a forger go to such expensive lengths when simpler cons existed? Others argue it's a lost language, perhaps a constructed cipher to protect alchemical secrets or heretical knowledge. Medieval scholars loved encoding their work, and the manuscript's words follow linguistic patterns, with recurring prefixes and suffixes that suggest grammar, not gibberish. Then there's the fringe view that it's not of this world at all. The otherworldly plants, alien flora, the star maps, guides from a different galaxy. It's a tempting thought until you remember Occam's razor. Decryption attempts read like a who's who of brilliance and failure. William Friedman, the man who cracked Japan's Purple Code in World War II, spent decades on the Voynich before declaring it might be a synthetic universal language. In 2016, a Canadian botanist claimed the plants were New World species, suggesting Aztec or Mixtec origins until linguists pointed out the script bears no resemblance to Mesoamerican glyphs. Even AI has stepped in, with algorithms analyzing word frequency and syntax, only to churn out contradictory guesses, medieval Hebrew encoded Ukrainian or worse statistical noise. The closest anyone came was in 2019, when a scholar proposed the text was Old Turkish written phonetically in Latin letters. Excitement flared until native speakers confirmed it still made no sense. What makes the manuscript truly unsettling isn't just its content, but its context. It appeared at the dawn of the scientific revolution, when Europe was hungry for esoteric knowledge. Hermeticism and alchemy blurred into early chemistry, and books of secrets traded hands for fortunes. The Voynich fits this era, yet stands utterly apart. Its illustrations mix precise botanical details with sheer fantasy, like someone drawing flora from memory after hearing a traveler's half-remembered tale. The astrological sections show a moon with craters centuries before telescopes could confirm them. These eerie near misses suggest something even stranger than a hoax, a lone genius working from fragmented, misunderstood sources, creating a personal encyclopedia of everything they believe to be true, whether real or imagined. Perhaps the answer lies not in deciphering the text, but in embracing the mystery. The Voynich is a mirror reflecting our own obsession with answers. Medieval monks saw divine riddles, Cold War cryptographers saw spycraft, today's internet sleuths see extraterrestrials. Its power lies in the questions it sparks, not the solutions it withholds. After all, some doors stay locked not because they guard treasure, but because we can't bear the thought of what or nothing might lie behind them, and so the manuscript waits, its vellum pages whispering to each new generation, try again. The legend of the crystal skulls begins not in the jungles of Central America, but in the smoky salons of 19th century Europe, where adventurers and charlatans mingled over glasses of brandy, trading tall tales of lost civilizations. These eerie, translucent artifacts carved from solid quartz with hollow eyes and grinning teeth first surfaced in the 1860s, allegedly pulled from ancient Maya or Aztec ruins. Dealers claimed they were relics of a forgotten technology, imbued with mystical powers. Some said they could see the future, others swore they emitted strange hums when touched. The most famous, nicknamed the Mitchell-Hedges skull after its flamboyant owner, even came with a Hollywood-ready backstory discovered by his teenage daughter beneath a toppled altar in Belize in 1924. But here's the twist, not a single skull has ever been found in a documented archaeological dig. Science eventually caught up with the myth. In 2008, researchers at the British Museum and the Smithsonian subjected several skulls to electron microscopy. The verdict: their surfaces showed traces of rotary wheels, tools the Maya didn't possess. The quartz itself came from Madagascar or the Alps, not Mesoamerica. Even the Mitchell-Hedges skull, once hailed as too perfect to be man-made, was likely crafted in Germany between 1867 and 1886, where workshops mass-produced exotic curios for wealthy collectors. The skulls weren't ancient prophecies, they were colonialist fantasies, souvenirs of a time when explorers could spin yarns about savage natives and lost treasure without scrutiny. Yet their pop culture grip only tightened. Indiana Jones vaulted them into legend with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, blending Nazi hunting with interdimensional aliens, a plot that, absurd as it was, echoed real New Age beliefs. Conspiracy theorists still insist museums are hiding the real skulls, claiming modern science is part of a cover-up. Psychics host skull activation ceremonies, and TikTok videos rack up millions of views with claims that the artifacts vibrate at healing frequencies. The irony: the skulls do hold power, just not the kind their creators imagined. They're mirrors of our own obsessions, the longing for a mystical past, the allure of secrets they don't want you to know, the thrill of holding something science can't explain. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't who made the skulls, but why we keep believing. In a world where satellites map every inch of the globe, these polished hunks of rock offer something irresistible, a shadowy corner where history still feels magical. They remind us that every era gets the artifacts it deserves. The Victorians wanted exotic trophies, and we crave mysteries that outsmart our own technology. The skulls endure not as Maya relics, but as monuments to the stories we'll always tell ourselves when the lights go out. The ocean never forgets. Beneath the waves off the coast of Brittany lies a legend as old as the tides, the sunken city of Wise, said to have vanished in a single night of divine retribution. According to medieval lore, Wise was a paradise of towering spires and bustling markets protected from the sea by massive gates. Its ruler, King Gradlon, loved his daughter Daha too much, indulging her every whim until she grew reckless. One night, she stole the keys to the floodgates from her father's neck, either for a lover's dare or out of sheer rebellion. The sea rushed in, swallowing the city whole. Gradlon escaped on horseback, but Daha perished, transformed by some accounts into a siren whose cries still echo in stormy weather. What makes this myth chilling isn't just the moral, it's the whispers of truth beneath it. Fishermen near Douarnenez swear they've seen stone walls beneath the waves, and historians note that the Bay of Douarnenez was once a freshwater lake before rising seas claimed it. Could Wise be a folk memory of a real Bronze Age settlement, drowned by climate change millennia before the term existed? Across the Channel, another drowned kingdom haunts Welsh folklore. Cantref Gwaelod, the Lowland Hundred, was a fertile realm stretching beyond what's now Cardigan Bay, protected by a system of dikes. Its fate hinged on a single night of negligence. The drunken gatekeeper Cethanin forgot to close the floodgates during a storm. The sea poured in, drowning villages, fields, and even a legendary prince named Gwydno Garanhir, whose lament survives in poetry. Farewell, land that was so generous, now fish swim where once we feasted. Like Wise, Cantref Gwaelod lingers in local memory. Satellite images reveal submerged forest stumps at low tide, and fishermen still pull up ancient tools from the seabed. The parallels are uncanny. Two coastal cultures, two tales of human error, two landscapes now home to crabs and kelp instead of kings. Flood myths are humanity's oldest cautionary tales, echoing from Mesopotamia to the Andes. The biblical Noah, Sumer's Ziusudra, and the Maya's Great Deluge all share a common thread: water as both cleanser and destroyer. But Wise and Cantref Gwaelod stand apart because they're not cosmic resets, their stories of very human folly. No divine wrath, just a princess's impulsiveness and a god's drunken stumble. Underwater archaeology adds tantalizing layers. Off India's Gulf of Combat, sonar images show geometric patterns suggestive of a lost city, while Japan's Yonaguni monument stirs debate about whether its terraces are natural or man-made. Even if these sites aren't literal Wise or Cantref Gwaelod, they prove that coastal civilizations have always danced on the knife's edge between abundance and oblivion. The most haunting question isn't whether these cities existed, but how many others vanished without a story. Rising sea levels after the last ice age swallowed vast stretches of coastline worldwide Doggerland between Britain and Europe, Sunderland in Southeast Asia. Oral traditions codify these losses into morality plays, but the real lesson might be simpler: the sea always wins. Bretons still say you can hear Wise's church bells tolling beneath the waves on quiet nights, a ghostly reminder that the line between legend and history is as fluid as the tide. And perhaps that's why these tales endure, not as warnings but as echoes. Every time a storm surge gnaws at a coastline or a king tide laps at a modern seawall, the past whispers, it happened once. It could happen again. Genghis Khan's final command was one he couldn't enforce with swords or fear, a decree so absolute it's kept his grave hidden for 8 centuries. When the Mongol conqueror died in 1227, his heirs carried out his last orders with terrifying precision. According to legend, the funeral procession slaughtered every witness they encountered on their journey to the burial site, servants, soldiers, even entire villages, to erase all traces of the route. Then came the most chilling detail. They diverted a river over the tomb, letting its waters weave an eternal shield of shifting sediment. The message was clear: even in death, the great Khan would not be disturbed. Modern technology has done little to lift this veil. Satellite imagery scans the Mongolian steppe in vain. Ground-penetrating radar meets layers of rock and permafrost. Drones crisscross the Kentai Mountains, where whispers place the tomb near Genghis's birthplace, but the landscape refuses to give up its secret. Part of this is geology. Rivers change course over centuries, burying clues deeper than any shovel can reach. But the greater barrier isn't dirt or distance, it's belief. For Mongolians, the tomb isn't just a historical site. It's a sacred space guarded by spiritual taboos older than Genghis himself. Disturbing it, many fear, would awaken a curse that brought the world to its knees once before. The lore surrounding the burial reads like a thriller. Chroniclers wrote that 1,000 horses trampled the gravesite flat, erasing all marks of excavation. Trees were then planted atop it, their roots weaving a living camouflage. Some accounts claim the slaves who built the tomb were executed mid-construction, their bodies left as warnings in the tunnels. Even the soldiers tasked with the killings reportedly took their own lives afterward, severing the last possible thread of knowledge. It's a story that blurs history and myth, but the intent is clear. Genghis Khan didn't just want to be buried, he wanted to disappear. What makes the search so tantalizing isn't just the potential treasures. Though legends of the tomb's wealth could rival Tutankhamun's, but the chance to rewrite the conqueror's legacy. Unlike other emperors, Genghis left no grand mausoleum, no inscribed sarcophagus. His power lay in mobility, in the ability to strike from nowhere and vanish like a sandstorm. Finding his grave would ground a man who defied borders even in death. Yet every expedition faces a wall of resistance. Local herders refuse to guide outsiders to suspected sites, and researchers who get too close report eerie setbacks, equipment failures, sudden storms, visions of shadowy riders in the night. Whether coincidence or curse, the effect is the same: the hunt stalls, and the steppe keeps its silence. Perhaps the tomb's greatest protection is the very empire it symbolizes. Genghis Khan unified the Mongol tribes not through shared blood but shared destiny. To disturb his rest isn't just a trespass, it's a betrayal of the pact he made with his people, to forever be both everywhere and nowhere. The drones may keep flying, the satellites may keep scanning, but some secrets aren't meant to be found. And so the Khan sleeps on, his last conquest, the patience of time itself. The Amber Room wasn't just a masterpiece, it was a golden illusion, a chamber where walls pulsed with light as if the sun itself had been trapped in resin. Crafted in the early 18th century for Prussia's Frederick I, this Tsarist marvel was a symphony of carved amber panels, gilded mosaics, and mirrors that multiplied their glow. When Russia's Peter the Great saw it, he had to possess it, trading 55 soldiers for the privilege. For 2 centuries, it glittered in Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg, a testament to human artistry, until 1941, when the Nazis rolled in with crowbars and crates. What happened next is history's most infamous art heist, a vanishing act that spawned decades of obsession, betrayal, and dead ends. Eyewitnesses to the looting described panels pried from walls with such haste, amber shards rained like broken glass. The Nazis catalogued their prize as Beutekunst looted art and shipped it to Königsberg Castle, where it was displayed briefly before the Allied bombs began falling. The last confirmed sighting came in 1945 as Soviet troops closed in. A curator's diary entry notes crates being hauled to the castle's basement, followed by a cryptic note: "The room cannot be moved." Then silence. Königsberg burned, the castle became rubble, and the Amber Room slipped into myth. Theories about its fate spiral like smoke. Some believe it still lies beneath modern Kaliningrad, sealed in a forgotten bunker. Others insist it was loaded onto the Wilhelm Gustloff, a refugee ship torpedoed by Soviets, now resting with 6,000 souls and possibly treasure at the bottom of the Baltic. Then there's the tantalizing paper trail, invoices suggesting parts reached Switzerland, or rumors of a secretive deal between Nazi officers and American collectors. The wildest claims point to South America, where fugitive officials supposedly smuggled crates through rat lines, but every lead dissolves under scrutiny. In 2008, German investigators dug up a cellar near Dresden after a deathbed tip only to find empty liquor bottles. Recent years have brought more noise than breakthroughs. Satellite images of a Polish bunker sparked a media frenzy in 2020, but excavations yielded rusted utensils, not gold. A 2017 documentary claimed to have found the room in a Czech mine, but historians dismissed the evidence as wishful thinking. Even technology falters. Ground-penetrating radar can't distinguish amber from ordinary sediment, and sonar scans of shipwrecks show only shadows. The amber room's greatest trick might be its ability to stay lost in an age when every inch of the planet is mapped. Perhaps the truth is simpler and sadder. Archivists note that Königsberg's castle burned for days after the siege, temperatures hot enough to reduce amber to tar. If the crates never left, they may have melted into the very rubble that now sits beneath Kaliningrad's concrete plazas. Yet the search persists, fueled by the room's symbolic weight. To Russians, it's a stolen heirloom. To Germans, a ghost of wartime shame. A reconstruction now glows in Catherine Palace, painstakingly crafted from old photographs, but it's a mirror without depth. The real amber room remains out there, or nowhere, taunting us with the same question. Can beauty ever truly disappear, or does it just wait for the right hand to uncover it again? Rome didn't lose battles often, but when it did, the defeats were spectacular. The disaster at Carrhae in 53 BCE wasn't just a military blunder, it was a vanishing act on an epic scale. Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of Rome's wealthiest men and a member of the ruling triumvirate, led 40,000 legionnaires into the Parthian Empire's arid heartland, hungry for glory to match his rivals Pompey and Caesar. What followed was a slaughter so complete it reshaped the ancient world. Parthian horse archers, firing from impossible distances, turned the sand red with Roman blood. Crassus himself was captured, and legend says molten gold was poured down his throat, a grim metaphor for the greed that doomed him. But the real mystery isn't how Rome lost. It's what happened to the 10,000 survivors who vanished into Persia without a trace. Ancient historians like Plutarch wrote that the prisoners were marched eastward, deep into Parthian territory, never to be heard from again. Yet whispers persisted for centuries that these legionnaires didn't just disappear, they became part of someone else's story. Fast forward to the 1st century CE, and Chinese chronicles from the Han Dynasty mention a curious detail. A frontier town called Lycian, guarded by soldiers with fish-scale formations, a dead ringer for Roman testudo tactics and deep-set eyes unlike the local population. Even stranger, archaeologists excavating the area in modern Gansu province found European DNA in some remains, along with artifacts resembling Roman armor and coins. Could these be the descendants of Crassus's lost legion, transplanted across continents by the whims of war? The theory gains traction when you piece together the ancient world's hidden connections. Parthia and Han China were sparring partners in the shadowy game of Silk Road politics, and prisoner exchanges weren't uncommon. Some scholars suggest the Romans were gifted as mercenaries or slaves to a border warlord, their skills repurposed to guard China's western frontier against nomadic tribes. A 2010 study even identified villagers in Gelajai with strikingly Mediterranean features: green eyes, wavy hair, who have passed down odd customs, like bullfighting rituals that echo Roman festivals. But skeptics counter that the evidence is circumstantial at best. The fish scale formations could describe any shield wall, and Eurasian trade routes had already mixed populations long before Carrie. What makes the Lycian legend so compelling isn't just the possibility of cross-continental survival, it's the haunting symmetry. Rome and Han China were mirror empires, each ruling their half of the known world, unaware of the other's true scale. For the Lost Legion to bridge that gap, even as captives, would rewrite history's margins in ink as bold as Caesar's, yet the truth may be simpler and sadder. Most Roman prisoners likely died in Parthian mines or were absorbed into local populations, their identities erased by generations. Still, the story endures because it taps into something primal, the idea that even in defeat, the past leaves fingerprints. Whether Lycians, foreigners, were truly Romans or not, they remind us that the ancient world was far smaller and far stranger than we ever imagined. Strange bones have a way of rewriting history, or at least the stories we tell about it. On the rugged island of Sardinia, towering stone structures known as the Giants' Tombs have guarded a peculiar secret for millennia. These megalithic monuments, some stretching over 30 feet long, weren't just built to impress. Their elongated chambers seem designed to hold bodies far larger than any modern human. Nearby, at the mysterious stepped platform of Monte Decode, often called Sardinia's Pyramid, excavations in the 1970s uncovered skeletons measuring over 8 feet tall. Were these the remains of an actual race of giants, or something even more fascinating, the seeds of a myth that outgrew its roots? The giants' tombs aren't subtle. Their most striking feature is a central stele, a massive, carved stone doorway often shaped like a towering figure with arms raised as if frozen mid-welcome. Local folklore insists these portals were built by a vanished race of giants, ancestors who walked the island before humans arrived, but modern archaeology paints a different picture. Carbon dating places the tombs between 2000 and 1000 BCE, squarely in the Neuragic civilization's heyday. The elongated skeletons, likely the result of ancient burial practices, bodies carefully arranged to create the illusion of greater size, or bones that shifted and stretched over centuries in the damp Sardinian soil. Yet the mystery deepens at Monte Decode, where the stepped altar resembles Mesopotamian ziggurats more than anything else in the Mediterranean. Who brought this architectural blueprint to Sardinia, and why did they build it alongside graves that seemed to cradle giants? Giant myths cling to every corner of the globe, from the biblical Nephilim to the Greek Cyclopes, often explained today as misidentified mammoth skulls with their central nasal cavities mistaken for single eye sockets. Sardinia's version stands apart because it's rooted in tangible, if ambiguous, evidence. Unlike the purely fictional titans or the frost giants of Norse lore, the Neuragic people left behind physical structures that demand explanation. Even the island's name fuels speculation. Some linguists trace Sardinia to the ancient word Shardana, a seafaring people mentioned in Egyptian texts as towering mercenaries. Coincidence, perhaps, but when Bronze Age carvings from Egypt to Anatolia depict unusually tall warriors, it's hard not to wonder if scattered encounters with exceptionally large individuals, whether through genetics, nutrition, or simple exaggeration, sparked a global obsession. The truth might lie in the way cultures remember. Sardinia's tombs weren't just graves, they were statements of power. By burying their dead in structures that dwarfed the living, the Neuragic people may have been crafting a lineage of legendary ancestors, heroes so grand their very bones defied nature. In this light, the giants' tombs become more than archaeology. Their early propaganda, a Bronze Age campaign to claim divine or superhuman origins. Similar practices echo in Peru's elongated skulls, artificially shaped in infancy to denote nobility, or the Celtic tales of Fir Bolg, a mythical race of giants who ruled Ireland before the gods. Every culture, it seems, needs its giants not as monsters but as mirrors. They reflect our hunger to connect with a past more extraordinary than the present, where the land was wilder, the people stronger, and the line between history and legend blissfully blurred. Today, the stones of Monte Decode whisper a quieter truth. The giants may have been ordinary people transformed by time and tale, but their legacy is no less colossal. Walk among the tombs at dusk when the low light stretches shadows like skeletons rising from the earth, and you'll understand why these stories endure. Some legends aren't meant to be debunked, they're meant to remind us that the past was never just one thing. It was a place where memory and monument conspired to make even the most ordinary bones extraordinary. On a winter night in 373 BCE, the earth itself turned against the city of Helike. One moment, this prosperous Greek settlement stood proud on the Gulf of Corinth, a hub of trade and culture with ties to the legendary Atlantis. The next, it was gone, swallowed whole by the sea. Ancient historians wrote of towering waves, of fissures opening to gulp down buildings, of a divine wrath so absolute that even rescue boats sent the next morning found nothing but churning water where a city had been. For centuries, Helike became a cautionary tale, a whisper of how quickly the gods could erase human arrogance. Then, in 2001, a team of archaeologists did the impossible. They found it. Divers probing the muddy seabed near the modern village of Rizamilos suddenly brushed against stone, not scattered blocks, but the bones of a city. Corinthian columns lay toppled like dominoes, pottery shards still stacked as if waiting for market day, even remnants of a cobbled road winding between ruins. The most chilling discovery, a thick layer of marine shells and sediment, proof that the land had sunk abruptly, preserved like a time capsule beneath the salt. Geologists studying the site now believe Helike fell victim to a perfect storm of disasters. First, a massive earthquake shattered the soft clay beneath the city, liquefying the ground. Then, as buildings collapsed into the slurry, a tsunami surged inland, dragging what remained into the depths. It wasn't divine punishment, just geology at its most ruthless. The parallels to Atlantis are impossible to ignore. Plato himself may have drawn inspiration from Helike's fate when crafting his sunken empire. The cities even shared a patron god, Poseidon, whose trident seemed to call them both beneath the waves. But while Atlantis remains a tantalizing what-if, Helike offers something far more valuable, a blueprint of how such a catastrophe unfolds. Underwater footage of the site shows walls tilting at jagged angles, their stones wrenched apart by seismic violence. A shattered kiln still holds unfired pottery, frozen mid-creation when disaster struck. These aren't just ruins, they're snapshots of a single night that rewrote history. What makes Helike's rediscovery so groundbreaking isn't just the confirmation of an ancient mystery solved. It's the realization that such events weren't rare. Along the same fault line, archaeologists have since found two other sunken cities, their ruins eerily similar. Modern seismology suggests the entire Gulf of Corinth is a coiled spring, capable of unleashing another Helike-scale disaster at any moment. When you stand on the shore today, watching fishing boats drift over where a city once thrived, the lesson is unmistakable. The sea never forgets, and if history has taught us anything, it's that we're never as safe as we think. Far to the north, beyond the reach of ordinary maps, ancient Greek poets whispered of a land untouched by sorrow or winter, Hyperborea, where the sun never set and golden-haired giants danced beneath eternal daylight. Herodotus described it as a place beyond the north wind, where Apollo himself would retreat in his chariot during the winter months. The Hyperboreans supposedly lived for 1,000 years in perfect harmony, their wisdom unmatched, their cities gleaming with impossible knowledge. It was the original Arctic utopia, a paradise so pure that no mortal could find it, only receive gifts from its inhabitants, like the sacred olive branches wrapped in wheat that reportedly appeared at Delphi. But what began as a poetic vision would warp into something far darker centuries later, when another mythical Northland, Thule, became the obsession of men who twisted legends into weapons. The name Thule first surfaced in Greek explorer Pytheas' 4th century BCE accounts of a distant island 6 days' sail from Britain, where the sun barely dipped below the horizon in summer. To the Romans, it represented the edge of the known world, a cold, mist-shrouded frontier. Fast forward to the early 20th century, and this vague cartographic footnote mutated into the spiritual homeland of Nazi occultists. The Thule Society, a secretive group that would later birth key figures of the Third Reich, latched onto the idea that Thule was the ancestral cradle of the Aryan race. They blended Norse mythology, racist pseudoscience, and outright fabrication to claim this Arctic Eden once housed a white, godlike civilization whose bloodline had degenerated through mixing with lesser races. Heinrich Himmler's SS would later fund expeditions to Iceland and Scandinavia, hunting for proof of this lost master race in rune stones and burial mounds. The leap from poetic Hyperborea to Nazi Thule reveals how easily mythology can be weaponized. Ancient Greeks never ascribed racial superiority to their northern utopia. Hyperborea was a metaphor for harmony with nature, not a call to conquest. But by the 1930s, pseudo-historians like Karl Horshofer and Helena Blavatsky's Theosophist followers had stitched together a patchwork of half-understood myths to create a dangerous fantasy that a pure Aryan homeland had once existed, and its revival justified any atrocity. This wasn't just bad history, it was a deliberate erasure of context. The Nazis cherry-picked snippets of Tacitus's writings about Germanic tribes, ignored the Greeks' emphasis on Hyperborea's hospitality, and spun a narrative of Nordic supremacy that ignored one glaring fact: neither Thule nor Hyperborea was ever about race. They were about humanity's longing for a place beyond suffering. Modern archaeology dismantles these myths stone by stone. No evidence of an advanced Arctic civilization exists. No ruins beneath Greenland's ice, no sunken cities off Norway's coast. Even the original Thule's location is likely Norway or the Shetland Islands, hardly the stuff of occult grandeur. Yet the allure persists, from neo-Nazi groups invoking Thule in online manifestos to New Agers misappropriating Hyperborea as a lost spiritual vortex. These legends still distort history to serve ideology. The lesson isn't just about the past, it's about how easily wonder can curdle into fanaticism. When we mistake metaphor for manifest destiny, paradise becomes a rallying cry for poison. Perhaps the true Hyperboreans were never a people at all, but a warning that the pursuit of utopia, untethered from fact, leads not to golden cities but to darkness. Magellan's crew swore they saw giants, not just tall men, but towering figures that made their ship's decks creak underfoot. When the explorer rounded the southern tip of South America in 1520, his chronicler Antonio Pigafetta wrote of encountering natives so massive the Europeans' heads barely reached their waists. So tall that the tallest of us only came up to their waist, he scribbled, describing their voices like bellowing bulls. The sailors named the region Patagonia, possibly from the term Patagon, meaning big feet in local dialects, but the real question wasn't just what Magellan found, but why generations kept finding giants long after his voyage ended. The sketches from early expeditions tell a curious story. Dutch explorer Jacob Lemaire's 1616 drawings depict Patagonians as lean figures twice the height of his crew, draped in animal skins. Captain John Byron, grandfather of the famous poet, claimed in 1764 that his men danced with natives over 9 feet tall. Yet by the late 1700s, the giants had shrunk. James Cook's journals noted the Tehulch people were tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, but hardly the monsters of legend. So what changed? Some historians point to a clever hoax: stilt walkers. Indigenous groups in the region used wooden stilts during ceremonies to appear taller, a practice Europeans might have misinterpreted as natural height. Others argue it was deliberate exaggeration. Tales of giants sold books and secured funding for risky voyages in an age when exploration was as much about storytelling as discovery. Bones added fuel to the fire. In 1896, archaeologists in Argentina uncovered femurs nearly 20 inches long, suggesting individuals over 7 feet tall. More recently, gigantism fossils surfaced in the region, with skeletal remains indicating rare hormonal conditions that caused extreme growth. But here's the twist: these finds date back thousands of years, long before European contact. Could fractured memories of these ancient giants have woven into local oral traditions, only to be grafted onto European myths centuries later? The Tehulch themselves told stories of the Chonchon, a mythical race of towering beings who once shared the land. The legend's staying power reveals more about the searchers than the searched. For Europeans, Patagonia was a blank space on the map where anything seemed possible. Dragons, gold cities, even biblical Nephilim. Giants became a metaphor for the unknown, shrinking as the continent was charted and civilized. Today, DNA studies show the Tehulch averaged around 5'11", tall for the era but hardly colossal. Yet the myth lingers, etched into the landscape itself, the stretch of coast where the real and imagined once stood eye to eye, reminding us that every explorer carries not just maps but the weight of their own expectations. In the end, the Patagonian giants were neither entirely fiction nor fact. They were a mirror held up to the age of discovery, reflecting all its wonder, deception, and hunger for the extraordinary. The letters arrived like clockwork, typed in neat, chilling prose, each one signed with a crosshair symbol that would soon become infamous. Between 1968 and 1969, the Zodiac Killer terrorized Northern California, leaving at least 5 dead and taunting authorities with cryptic ciphers he claimed held his identity. But unlike other serial killers who sought notoriety, the Zodiac seemed obsessed with the game itself, weaving his crimes into an elaborate puzzle that defied logic. His first cipher, a string of jumbled symbols mailed to newspapers in '69, was cracked within days by a school teacher and a cryptographer. Yet the others, particularly the 340-character Zodiac 340, have resisted decades of scrutiny, becoming the Rosetta Stones of modern true crime. Why? Because buried in their twisting glyphs might be more than just a name. Some researchers believe they're maps, not to the killer's identity, but to treasures hidden in the California hills. The ciphers themselves are a bizarre mix of ancient and modern. The Zodiac borrowed symbols from astrology, medieval alchemy, and even maritime signal flags, creating a language that felt pulled from multiple eras. His obsession with cycles and celestial alignments fueled theories that the codes pointed to physical locations, perhaps loot from his unsolved robberies, or even relics from earlier crimes never connected to him. In 2020, after 51 years of dead ends, the FBI's cryptanalysis unit teamed with private codebreakers to crack the 340 cipher using a brute force algorithm. The result, a chilling but disjointed confession. "I hope you are having lots of fun trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber." Yet the final lines devolved into gibberish, leaving experts divided. Had they truly broken it, or was the Zodiac's final laugh hiding deeper layers? Treasure hunters point to eerie patterns. One decrypted section mentions Mount Diablo, a peak east of San Francisco, alongside coordinates that align with an old military installation. Another references Paradis, a misspelling found in multiple letters, leading some to scour nearby Paradise Ridge for buried clues. The most compelling theory comes from retired detective Ken Maines, who believes the ciphers form a kill map, a geographic puzzle marking both past crimes and future targets, with treasure as the bait to keep investigators chasing shadows. The idea isn't far-fetched. The Zodiac once mailed a victim's bloodied shirt to the press with a note boasting, "This is the Zodiac speaking. If he'd go that far, why not bury a trophy and dare someone to find it?" What makes the case endure isn't just the unsolved murders, but the way the Zodiac weaponized mystery itself. Unlike Jack the Ripper, who vanished into London's fog, the Zodiac promised answers, then dangled them just out of reach. His ciphers borrow from history's greatest unsolved codes, like the Voynich Manuscript's botanical riddles or the Beale cipher's lost gold. Even now, amateur sleuths armed with AI and crowd-sourced algorithms pick apart every symbol, searching for the one twist of logic that might unravel it all. And perhaps that was the real trap all along, not a treasure, but an endless maze with no exit. The Zodiac didn't just want to be remembered. He wanted us to keep looking, even when all we find are our own reflections in the dark. The summer of 1518 in Strasbourg began like any other warm breezes, bustling markets, the hum of daily life in a medieval city. Then, without warning, the dancing started. It wasn't festive, it wasn't voluntary. A woman known as Frau Trophia stepped into the street one July day and began twisting her body in frenzied, jerking movements, her feet pounding the cobblestones as if pulled by invisible strings. Within a week, dozens more joined her, their limbs flailing uncontrollably, their faces contorted in exhaustion and terror. By August, over 400 people were caught in the grip of what history now calls the dancing plague, a phenomenon so bizarre it defies modern explanation. Was it poison? Some historians point to ergot, a fungus that grows on damp rye and produces chemicals similar to LSD. Ingesting tainted bread could trigger hallucinations and muscle spasms, symptoms eerily close to the dancer's convulsions. Yet the plague lasted for months, far longer than typical ergotism, and records mention no other telltale signs like gangrenous limbs. Others argue it was mass psychogenic illness, a physical manifestation of collective trauma. Strasbourg had been ravaged by famine, disease, and relentless religious upheaval. The dancers, many of them impoverished and marginalized, may have been acting out the stress of a society on the brink, their bodies literally screaming what words could not express. Then there's the darker theory, divine punishment. Medieval Europe was steeped in superstition, and outbreaks of dancing mania weren't isolated to Strasbourg. Similar episodes flared in Aachen, Maastricht, and even as far back as the 13th century, when a group of children danced themselves to exhaustion on the road to Hamelin. Yes, that Hamelin. Church authorities often interpreted these events as curses or demonic possession, prescribing exorcisms or pilgrimages to appease vengeful saints. In Strasbourg's case, the city council initially encouraged the dancing, even hiring musicians and building a stage, believing the afflicted needed to dance it out. When that failed, they reversed course, banishing the dancers to a mountaintop shrine where some reportedly collapsed and died from heart attacks or strokes. The chilling truth is, we may never know what really happened. Unlike other historical mysteries, the dancing plague leaves no ruins to excavate, no artifacts to analyze, just fragile parchment accounts and the echoes of desperate feet on stone. Yet its legacy lingers, a reminder of how easily the human mind and body can unravel under the weight of fear, whether from poison, poverty, or the paralyzing belief that the world itself is cursed. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't what caused the plague, but what it would take for such a thing to happen again, and whether, in our own age of anxiety, we're really so different from those who danced until their shoes filled with blood. One summer day in the 12th century, villagers in the Suffolk town of Woolpit made a discovery straight out of a fairy tale. Two children, a boy and a girl, huddled at the mouth of a wolf pit, their skin tinged a vivid shade of green. Clad in strange, coarse garments and speaking a language no one recognized, they were terrified, starving, and utterly out of place in the English countryside. When offered food, they refused all but raw beans, which they ate with desperate urgency. The boy, weakened and ill, soon died, but the girl survived, eventually learning English and shedding her emerald hue. Her explanation only deepened the mystery. She claimed she and her brother came from a twilight land called St. Martin's, where the sun never rose and all the people were green. Was this a case of interstellar visitors, displaced refugees, or something far darker lurking in the medieval psyche? Theories stack like layers in an archaeological dig, each revealing a different facet of the puzzle. The most grounded explanation points to Flemish immigrants fleeing persecution. During the reign of King Henry II, Flemish settlers in England faced violent reprisals, and some may have hidden in forests or underground tunnels, hence the children's description of a sunless world. Malnourishment could explain their greenish skin, a symptom of chlorosis from iron deficiency, or even eating toxic plants like silverweed, their strange language. A Flemish dialect alien to English ears, but skeptics counter. Why would refugees, even traumatized ones, claim to hail from an otherworldly subterranean realm? Folklorists argue the story echoes older Celtic myths of green folk, beings from hollow hills or fairy mounds, suggesting the tale might be a Christianized version of much older superstitions. Then there's the sulfur theory. Woolpit was surrounded by mining operations, and exposure to sulfur compounds could cause a greenish pallor, a condition known as sulfhemoglobinemia. If the children were orphaned miners' kids, their survival in caves or tunnels might account for their aversion to normal food and their description of a gloomy homeland. But medieval chroniclers like Ralph of Coggeshall, who recorded the incident, made no mention of mines, focusing instead on the uncanny details: the girl's eventual baptism, her marriage to a local man, and her insistence that her homeland lay beyond a great river. These gaps leave room for wilder interpretations, from parallel dimensions to extraterrestrial encounters, though these say more about modern obsessions than medieval reality. The green children endure because they straddle the line between fact and folklore. Unlike pure myths, their story appears in sober historical records, yet it's imbued with symbolism that resonates across cultures. Green is the color of life and decay, of otherworldly beings from Celtic fairies to the little green men of modern UFO lore. The beans they ate. In medieval symbology, beans were linked to the soul's journey, often placed in graves as sustenance for the dead. Even the wolf pit, a grim trap for predators, hints at a world where boundaries between human and animal, natural and supernatural, were dangerously thin. Ultimately, the children's tale may be less about origins and more about assimilation. The surviving girl's transformation, her fading green tint, her conversion to Christianity, her silent acceptance of a new life, mirrors the medieval world's struggle to absorb the unknown. Whether refugees, poisoning victims, or figments of collective imagination, they became a mirror for the fears and fascinations of their time, and perhaps that's why the story still captivates. In an age of disinformation and cultural dislocation, the green children remind us that mystery doesn't always demand an answer. Sometimes it's the questions that linger, verdant and alive, pushing us to wonder what other strangeness might be lurking just beyond the edges of the map. The Pacific Ocean hides countless secrets, but for one eccentric 19th century scholar, its waves whispered the name of a forgotten empire that never was. Augustus Le Plongeon, a self-taught archaeologist obsessed with Maya ruins, became convinced he decoded a story far grander than Atlantis. Mu, a lost continent stretching from Hawaii to the Philippines, home to an advanced civilization that seeded all ancient cultures. His proof, a mistranslation of the Trono Codex, a Maya manuscript he claimed described Mu's catastrophic sinking in a single night. Never mind that actual Mayanists dismissed his work outright. Le Plongeon's vision, fueled by Victorian-era exoticism and outright racism, spiraled into a pseudo-scientific saga that still echoes today. Le Plongeon's Mu wasn't just a place, it was a racial fantasy. He described its inhabitants as towering, white-skinned supermen who had sailed east to civilize the Egyptians and west to teach the Maya. Indigenous achievements in his telling were merely hand-me-downs from this imagined Aryan-like progenitor. This racist archaeology, sadly typical of his era, served a darker purpose, justifying colonialism as a reclamation of lost white glory. By the 1930s, occultists like James Churchward spun Mu into New Age dogma, claiming it held psychic powers and anti-gravity technology. The irony, Le Plongeon's entire theory rested on a linguistic blunder. The Maya glyph he read as Mu actually referenced a rain god's name, no different than mistaking Zeus for Europe. Science sank Mu for good in the 20th century. Plate tectonics confirmed no continent could vanish without trace in the Pacific's geologically active Ring of Fire. Seismic surveys mapped the ocean floor down to the basalt, revealing only submerged volcanoes, not the drowned cities or highways pseudo-historians promised. Yet Mu's ghost lingers in pop culture, from comic books to conspiracy forums, often conflated with another fabricated land, Lemuria. Lemuria, Mu's stranger, sadder cousin. Proposed in the 1860s to explain lemur fossils in India and Madagascar, this hypothetical land bridge was debunked when continental drift theory took hold. But like Mu, it was hijacked by mystics. Theosophist Helena Blavatsky reimagined Lemuria as a swampy paradise of egg-laying hermaphrodites, a racist fever dream that still pollutes alt history today. The key difference: Mu was always fiction, while Lemuria began as flawed science warped into fantasy. What makes these lost continents endure isn't evidence but longing. They tap into our dread that whole chapters of history might slip away, and our arrogance that we'd surely recognize the ruins if they existed, the real tragedy. While chasing phantoms, we overlook genuine mysteries. The Pacific does hold sunken lands, not continents, but real islands like Zealandia, a submerged fragment that was home to ancient cultures. These aren't myths, their stories are written in coral and sediment, waiting for us to listen. Mu and Lemuria were mirrors, reflecting the biases of their inventors. The ocean, though, it keeps deeper secrets, ones that don't need fantasies to be fascinating. The map should not exist, at least not with what it supposedly shows. In 1513, Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis crafted a stunning world chart, blending Portuguese sailing logs, Arab cartography, and, if certain interpretations are correct, knowledge no civilization should have possessed for another 3 centuries. The surviving fragment, discovered in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace in 1929, depicts the Atlantic with uncanny accuracy, from the jagged coasts of Brazil to the serpentine bends of the Amazon. But the real shock lies at the bottom edge, a landmass bearing an eerie resemblance to Antarctica without its ice cap. Here's the problem. Antarctica was officially discovered in 1820, and its glacial cover formed millions of years ago. So how could a 16th century map show Queen Maud Land's contours as if someone had surveyed it pre-ice? Proponents of lost ancient civilizations, like Graham Hancock, argue the Piri Reis map preserves fragments of a prehistoric world survey, perhaps by a seafaring culture like Atlantis, whose explorers mapped the globe before their knowledge was scattered and forgotten. The map's own notes fuel this fire. Piri Reis credits unnamed ancient kings and even references a source from the time of Alexander the Great. Could this be a faded copy of a copy, tracing back to some advanced Ice Age cartographer? Skeptics wield science like a scalpel. Modern analysis suggests the Antarctica segment more likely depicts a distorted South America, a common error in early maps where coastlines blurred together. As for the ice-free detail, wishful thinking. The map lacks longitude lines, and its southern landmass could just as easily be a fanciful extension of Patagonia, embellished with sea monsters and legend. Even Piri Reis's sources might be misunderstood. His references to Antikythera maps could mean old, not ancient, perhaps Spanish charts from recent voyages. And then there's the biggest hole. If this was truly Antarctica, where's the rest of the continent? The fragment shows only a sliver, conveniently ambiguous. The debate crystallizes a deeper divide: how we view anomalies in history. Hancock and his allies see a smoking gun for lost high cultures, their knowledge passed down through fragments like the Piri Reis map. Mainstream scholars counter that such leaps ignore Occam's razor. that imperfect early maps are products of their time, not proof of forgotten super-civilizations. Yet the map's precision in other areas is startling. It includes the Andes, unnamed until the 1530s, and accurately places the Cape of Good Hope. Either Piri Reis had access to astonishingly good spy networks, or something stranger was afoot. Perhaps the truth lies in the gaps between theories. The Piri Reis map is a palimpsest of human curiosity, layering hard-won exploration with myth and misinterpretation. Its Antarctica might not prove a lost civilization, but it does remind us how much history is written on parchment, not stone, vulnerable to fire, time, and our own thirst for wonder. After all, every map tells two stories, one of the world it charts and another of the hands that drew it, dreaming of lands just beyond the edge of the known. Rome's fate once rested on 9 scrolls of prophecy so powerful, emperors consulted them in moments of crisis until flames reduced them to ashes. The Sibylline books weren't just ordinary oracle texts. Legend claims they were sold to Rome's last king, Tarquin the Proud, by a mysterious old woman who burned 3 of them before he'd agreed to her price. She returned, burned 3 more, and finally convinced him to pay the original sum for the last 3. It was a bargain that would shape the destiny of an empire. These surviving scrolls, housed in Jupiter's temple, allegedly predicted everything from Hannibal's invasion to the rise of Augustus. But when the temple burned in 83 BCE, Rome's sacred playbook for navigating disasters vanished forever, or did it? The real intrigue lies in the fragments that might have slipped through the cracks. Early Christian writers like Lactantius claimed copies of Sibylline prophecies circulated long after the originals burned, some even foretelling the coming of Christ. Conveniently, these Christianized versions mirrored biblical themes: a global flood, a final judgment, while older, politically charged prophecies faded away. Historians suspect medieval monks selectively preserved lines that aligned with church doctrine, stitching together a patchwork of pagan and Christian mysticism. The most famous survivor, the Judgment Day passage describing rivers of fire and the moon turning to blood, eerily similar to modern doomsday cult rhetoric. What makes the Sibylline legend so potent isn't just its longevity, but its adaptability. These prophecies were never static, they evolved to fit each era's anxieties. When Rome feared barbarians, the Sibyl's words warned of northern invasions. When plague struck, her verses hinted at divine punishment. Today's conspiracy theorists and apocalypse preachers follow the same playbook, repackaging vague, ancient warnings to fit contemporary fears. The parallels are uncanny. Just as Roman elites controlled access to the Sibylline books to steer public opinion, modern influencers cherry-pick prophecies to validate their narratives. The medium changes, but the human craving for certainty in chaos remains. Archaeologists may never recover the original scrolls, but their ghost lingers in every tweet about Nostradamus or viral end times prediction. Perhaps the Sibyl's greatest trick wasn't foreseeing the future. It was crafting a mirror so flexible, every generation sees its own reflection staring back. And in that reflection, we're all just modern Tarquins, desperate to buy certainty, even as half the truth burns before our eyes. The desert doesn't give up its secrets easily, but when it does, the revelations rewrite history. In the parched sands of China's Tarim basin, archaeologists uncovered mummies so shockingly out of place, they sparked a decades-long mystery. These weren't the expected Han Chinese ancestors, but fair-haired, long-nosed individuals in colorful woolens, buried with cheese and hemp baskets, their features unmistakably Caucasian. Dating back 4,000 years, these bodies were preserved like leather by the dry air, their eyelashes still fluttering over hollow cheeks. The shock wasn't just their appearance, but their location, 1,000 miles deep into what's now China's Xinjiang region. How did Indo-Europeans reach this remote corner of Asia 2 millennia before Marco Polo, and what forgotten chapter of the Silk Road do they represent? The mummy's attire tells a story as vivid as their genetics. One striking find, the beauty of Lulan, wore a red woolen tunic and goatskin boots, her hair still braided with feathers. Nearby, a man dubbed the chieftain was buried with 10 hats, suggesting a culture obsessed with status and symbolism. Most baffling of all, their textiles. The woven patterns resemble those of Celtic clans and ancient Anatolians, complete with tartan-like plaids, a style thought to originate thousands of miles west. Even their funeral offerings defy expectations. Remnants of ephedra, a plant sacred to Zoroastrians, hint at spiritual links to Persia. These weren't lost travelers, they were a thriving civilization, planting roots where no Europeans were supposed to be. Linguistics adds another layer to the puzzle. Centuries later, Buddhist monks in the same region wrote in a language called Tocharian, an Indo-European tongue as distant from Latin as it is from Sanskrit. For years, scholars assumed it arrived via later migrations, but the Tarim mummies predate Tocharian texts by over 2,000 years, suggesting a staggering possibility. These people might have been the original Tocharians, carrying an early form of the language into Asia during the Bronze Age. Imagine the ripple effects. If Indo-European languages seeped into China this early, could their myths, technologies, or even genes have woven into East Asian culture long before the historical record noticed? Modern politics have clouded the mystery. China's government, wary of fueling separatist sentiments in Xinjiang, initially downplayed the mummies' European roots, emphasizing instead their role in a multicultural ancient Silk Road. But DNA doesn't lie. Genetic studies confirm the mummies shared ancestry with steppe herders from the Black Sea region, their journey likely following the same routes that would later transport silk and spices. The real bombshell, some of their descendants still live in Xinjiang today, their genes lingering in the Aiker population. This isn't just archaeology, it's a living thread stretching across millennia. The Tarim mummies force us to rethink the map of the ancient world. We picture early cultures isolated in their corners, yet here's proof of transcontinental wanderers bridging east and west before the pyramids were built. Their presence whispers of a Silk Road that wasn't just a trade route, but a highway for ideas, languages, and people, a melting pot millennia before the term existed. And perhaps that's the most humbling lesson of all. History never fits neatly into boxes. Sometimes it takes the form of a red-haired woman in the desert, her silent story daring us to reconsider everything we thought we knew. The peat bogs of northern Europe hold more than waterlogged roots. They cradle the dead in an eerie, timeless embrace. When a peat cutter's spade slices through the moss in places like Denmark or Ireland, it sometimes strikes something far stranger than soil. Leathery skin, matted hair, and faces frozen in expressions that range from serenity to agony. These are the bog bodies, Iron Age individuals preserved with such startling clarity that even their fingerprints remain intact. The most famous Toland man looks almost peaceful, his eyelids gently closed as if in sleep, a noose still coiled around his neck. But this isn't rest, it's ritual sacrifice, a snapshot of a moment when humanity's relationship with the divine was written in flesh and rope. What makes these bodies so unsettling isn't just their preservation, but the intimacy of their details. Toland man's last meal, a simple porridge of barley and flax, still sits in his stomach, a humble supper before his journey to the other side. Forensic analysis reveals traces of mistletoe in other victims' systems, hinting at druidic rites or ceremonial poisons. Even their injuries tell stories: slit throats, crushed skulls, deliberate breaks in the legs to prevent escape. These weren't random acts of violence but calculated offerings, likely to fertility gods or spirits of the land. The bogs, with their acidic, oxygen-poor waters, acted as both tomb and temple, sealing the bodies in a chemical embrace that halted decay for millennia. Modern reconstructions bring these ancient faces back to life with uncanny precision. Toland man's likeness, sculpted from scans of his skull, shows a man in his 40s with deep-set eyes and a furrowed brow, not a king or warrior, but an ordinary farmer chosen for an extraordinary fate. His expression, reconstructed from the soft tissue preserved by the peat, carries a haunting dignity, as if he accepted his role in a drama far larger than himself. Other bodies, like the Id girl with her half-shaved head, or Grawbell man with his throat sliced ear to ear, wear their deaths openly, their features twisted in ways that suggest terror or trance-like surrender. Yet the bog bodies are more than sacrifices, they're time capsules. Pollen grains trapped in their clothing reveal the landscapes they walked. Patches of fabric, often undyed and roughly woven, speak of a life tied to the earth. Some, like old Croghan man's perfectly manicured nails, hint at social status, while others bear calluses from relentless labor. The absence of battle scars on most suggests these weren't warriors, but perhaps scapegoats, criminals, or volunteers chosen to bridge the human and divine. The lingering question isn't just why they were killed, but why the bogs. To the Iron Age mind, these liminal spaces, neither land nor water, may have been thresholds to the afterlife. The bodies, weighed down with stakes or stones, were deliberately placed where they'd sink beyond reach, as if anchoring a gift to the gods below. Today, they resurface as messengers from a world where the boundary between life and death was porous, and where the price of a good harvest might be a stranger's last breath. Their faces, reconstructed or preserved, don't accuse or plead, they simply wait, silent witnesses to a time when the sacred demanded flesh and blood. Divers scouring the wreck of an ancient Roman ship off the Greek island of Antikythera in 1901 weren't searching for treasure, they were hunting bronze statues. But what they hauled up from the depths would rewrite history far more dramatically than any sculpture. Encased in a lump of corroded green fragments, its gears fused together by centuries of salt water, lay a device so advanced it would take over 100 years of technological progress just to understand it. The Antikythera mechanism, as it came to be known, wasn't just a relic, it was a 2,000-year-old astronomical computer, its precision engineering unmatched until the mechanical clocks of the Renaissance. X-ray imaging and CT scans have since revealed the machine's breathtaking complexity. 37 interlocking bronze gears, some with teeth cut to exacting triangular profiles, moved a series of dials and pointers that tracked the sun, moon, and 5 known planets across the zodiac. One gear even modeled the moon's elliptical orbit with a pin and slot mechanism, accounting for celestial irregularities a millennium before Kepler described planetary motion. But the real genius lay in its predictions. Turn the hand crank, and the device could calculate solar eclipses down to the hour, forecast Olympic Games cycles, and even flag upcoming lunar phases in a specific port essential for ancient sailors. This wasn't just a tool, it was a miniature cosmos in a box, an embodiment of Greek celestial mastery. The ghost of Archimedes haunts the mechanism's origins. Cicero wrote that the mathematician built a similar sphere demonstrating planetary movements, and Syracuse, Archimedes' home, was sacked by Romans just decades before the Antikythera ship sank. Could this be one of his lost inventions, looted as war booty? The device's differential gears, previously thought invented in the 16th century, suggest a mind of his caliber. Yet no other artifacts of comparable sophistication have surfaced from antiquity. That absence fuels one of archaeology's great riddles. Was this a fluke, the sole survivor of a tradition of high mechanics erased by time, or proof that ancient Greek science soared higher than we dared imagine? Modern reconstructions bring the mechanism's brilliance to life. Meshing laser-scanned gears with 3D printed replicas, researchers have recreated its celestial ballet. The moon pointer's subtle speed changes mirroring the real lunar dance, the eclipse dial's warnings aligning with historical records. But these triumphs underscore a deeper loss. When Rome's libraries burned and the Dark Ages descended, the knowledge to build such devices evaporated. The Antikythera mechanism didn't just predict eclipses, it foreshadowed a future where technology took another path, where Leonardo's notebooks weren't curiosities but stepping stones. Its silent gears whisper a tantalizing what if. How much farther might science have traveled if this lineage hadn't been swallowed by the sea and by time itself? From above, the Nazca Desert looks like a giant sketchbook line stretched for miles. Geometric shapes unfold with eerie precision, and colossal animals etched into the earth seem to shimmer in the heat. These markings, known as the Nazca Lines, have baffled explorers since they were first spotted from planes in the 1920s. How could a culture 2,000 years old create such intricate designs when they couldn't even see them from the ground? And more importantly, why? Theories range from the pragmatic to the downright fantastical, each one peeling back another layer of this ancient enigma. Let's start with the spectacle itself. Some lines run dead straight for nearly 30 miles, defying the natural curves of the landscape. Others form elaborate figures. A hummingbird with wings outstretched, a spider with legs perfectly proportioned, even a bizarre humanoid dubbed the astronaut, staring blankly at the sky. The sheer scale is dizzying. The largest glyphs span over 600 feet, impossible to take in fully without modern flight. Yet the Nazca people created them by simply removing the dark, oxidized pebbles on the surface, revealing lighter soil beneath. No heavy machinery, no aerial guidance, just feet, ropes, and generations of patience. Now, the big question, what were they for? The wildest theory insists they're alien landing strips, an idea popularized by Erich von Däniken in the 1960s. But let's be real, extraterrestrials with interstellar tech probably wouldn't need runway markers scuffed into dirt. More plausible is the ritual pathway hypothesis. Archaeologists note that the lines often converge at ceremonial sites, suggesting pilgrims walked them in spiritual processions. Some glyphs align with solstice sunrises, hinting at celestial worship. Then there's the water map theory. The Nazca lived in one of the driest places on Earth, and many lines trace underground aquifers. Could these markings be a sacred blueprint for survival, guiding people to hidden wells? Recent AI breakthroughs add fresh twists to the mystery. In 2019, machine learning scanned satellite imagery and uncovered over 100 new Nazca figures, some hidden in plain sight for millennia. Among them, a serpentine monster, a pair of legs, and a surreal, two-faced figure. The discovery raises unsettling questions. If we're still finding glyphs today, how many more lie buried? And why did the Nazca feel compelled to keep expanding this sprawling desert gallery? The most haunting possibility, the Nazca did see their work, just not from the ground. Experiments show that hot air balloons made from local materials could have lifted observers high enough to supervise construction. Imagine floating silently over the desert, watching as your community's collective effort takes shape below, a ritual in itself, a dance between earth and sky. Whether messages to the gods, maps for the living, or something we've yet to comprehend, the Nazca lines endure as a testament to human ingenuity. Not because they defy explanation, but because they remind us that even in the harshest places, we've always sought to leave marks that outlast us. And in that, they've succeeded beyond measure. The Irish myth cycles speak of a people who arrived not by boat, but in ships that sailed the clouds, the Tuatha de Danann, whose name means the folk of the goddess Danu. According to the Leba Gabála Érenn, Ireland's medieval book of invasions, they descended from the heavens in a mist so thick it darkened the sun for 3 days. When the fog lifted, there they stood, a race of god-kings wielding unbreakable swords, spears that never missed, and a stone that roared when touched by the rightful ruler. But were these otherworldly beings, as later Christian scribes claimed, fallen angels barred from heaven yet too proud for hell, or echoes of a real civilization lost to time? The parallels to Atlantis are hard to ignore. Like Plato's doomed empire, the Tuatha de Danann were said to possess advanced wisdom, mastering medicine, metallurgy, and even weather control. Therefore, legendary treasures, the Sword of Nuada, the Spear of Lug, the Cauldron of Dagda, and the Lia Fail Coronation Stone, mirror the four sacred objects of Welsh and Arthurian lore, hinting at a pan-Celtic memory of a golden age. Even their arrival aligns with archaeological upheavals. Carbon dating places a sudden cultural shift in Ireland around 1200 BCE, when bronze weaponry and intricate metalwork appeared as if from nowhere. Could the Tuatha De be a folk memory of Bell Beaker traders or Mycenaean refugees, their seafaring exploits exaggerated into flight? Then there's the sky ship conundrum. The Liber Gabola describes their vessels as dark clouds, but other texts imply something more tangible, perhaps the billowing sails of advanced ships mistaken for floating islands by coastal observers. This wouldn't be unique. Polynesian legends tell of the first Hawaiians arriving on flying canoes, likely a metaphor for swift outriggers. The Dogon people of Mali recount sky gods descending in spinning vessels, eerily reminiscent of the Tuatha's misty arrival. Even the biblical Ezekiel's wheel might fit this pattern. Cross-cultural memories of contact with seafarers or conquerors so technologically superior, their machines seemed like magic. Yet the Tuatha De's most enduring legacy lies in what they became. After their defeat by the mortal Milesians, they retreated underground, becoming the Owls-She Islands fairy folk. Their hollow hills and luminous sheer mounds echo a global motif of hidden people, from Japan's Kame to Greece's Titan caves. Modern excavations at Newgrange and Tara reveal passage tombs aligned with solstices, suggesting the Tuatha's astronomical prowess wasn't pure fiction. Perhaps the truth straddles both worlds. A gifted Bronze Age tribe whose feats, whispered across generations, grew wings and wonder. Their story reminds us that every myth is a palimpsest history rewritten until it gleams like a sword unsheathed from the mist. Geneticists tracing the threads of Ireland's ancestry have uncovered a startling connection, one that pulls the Tuatha de Danann out of myth and into the realm of human history. Recent DNA studies reveal a significant migration from Iberia to Ireland around 2500 BCE, a population wave that aligns eerily with the Tuatha De's legendary arrival. These newcomers carried distinct genetic markers, including a high frequency of the Y chromosome haplogroup R1b, still dominant in modern Irish bloodlines. But here's the twist. Their skeletal remains show advanced tool use and metallurgical knowledge unusual for Bronze Age Europe. Could these have been the real Tuatha De, not gods, but an elite class of metalworkers and healers whose skills seemed supernatural to the indigenous Fomorians and Fir Bolg? The magic artifacts of the Tuatha De take on new meaning when viewed through this lens. The Spear of Lug, said to never miss its mark, might have been an early form of ballistics technology, perhaps a weighted throwing spear with unrivaled precision. The Cauldron of Dagda, which fed armies without emptying, could reflect advanced agricultural practices like crop rotation or grain storage, revolutionary in a land of subsistence farming. Even the Lia Fail, the roaring coronation stone, may have been an acoustic marvel. Experimental archaeologists found that certain megalithic stones emit low-frequency vibrations when struck, a phenomenon that would have awed ancient onlookers. These weren't divine gifts but innovations so ahead of their time, they blurred the line between science and sorcery. Celtic revivalists today don't just study the Tuatha De, they venerate them. Neo-pagan groups like the Irish Reconstructionists perform rituals at sites tied to the Tuatha De, such as the Hill of Tara, where the Lia Fail once stood. For them, these figures aren't mere myths but ancestral spirits, embodiments of Ireland's pre-Christian identity. This spiritual resurgence isn't nostalgia, it's reclamation. After centuries of colonization and forced conversion, the Tuatha De represent a cultural counterpoint, a reminder that Ireland's oldest stories predate the cross and the crown. Artists like Dam the Bard weave their lore into modern music, while festivals like Lugnasad revive games once held in the god King Lug's honor. yet the most tantalizing clues lie beneath the soil. Excavations at the Bru-Naboin complex, older than the pyramids, reveal astronomical alignments so precise they rival the Antikythera mechanism. Could the Tuatha De's famed mastery of the heavens stem from a lost school of Bronze Age astronomers? Skeptics argue these finds are coincidental, but the patterns are hard to ignore. From Iberian Diné to resonant standing stones, the evidence whispers that every myth holds a kernel of truth, not because gods walked among us, but because human ingenuity can be so extraordinary it borders on the divine. The Tuatha de Danann endure not as figments but as mirrors, reflecting our own potential to transform the mundane into the miraculous. Legends don't just vanish, they evolve. Every myth we've uncovered, from Atlantis's drowned spires to the Tuatha de Danann's cloud-sailed arrival, isn't just a story. It's a fingerprint, a mark left by someone somewhere who witnessed something extraordinary or needed the world to believe they did. These tales echo with the same hunger that keeps us staring at old maps, digging through ruins, or rewatching grainy UFO footage. Because buried beneath the embellishments and the moral lessons, there's always a spark of something real. A flood that became a divine punishment, a towering stranger who became a giant, a forgotten technology that became magic. What's fascinating isn't just the stories themselves, but why they stick. The Amber Room isn't just lost treasure, it's a metaphor for beauty swallowed by war. The Dancing Plague isn't just a medical oddity, it's a flare gun shot into the dark, signaling the raw terror of a world spiraling out of control. Even the Voynich Manuscript, with its unreadable script, taps into our deepest fear, that somewhere out there knowledge exists that we might never grasp. These legends endure because they're not about the past, they're about us, our longing to believe that history is grander, stranger, and more mysterious than textbooks dare to admit. But here's the twist: the most tantalizing legends aren't the ones we've solved. It's the ones that still dangle just out of reach, the tomb of Genghis Khan daring us to defy curses and dig. The Hanging Gardens taunting us with their absence, the Antikythera mechanism whispering that our ancestors might have been far more ingenious than we ever imagined. These aren't dead ends, they're invitations, puzzles waiting for the right mind, the right tool, the right moment to click into place. So where does that leave us? Not with answers, but with better questions. What if Plato's Atlantis wasn't a cautionary tale, but a distorted memory of the Sea People's raids? What if the green children weren't poisoned refugees, but survivors of some deeper subterranean horror we've yet to uncover? The beauty of these legends is that they refuse to be caged by a single explanation. They're living things, shifting shape with every generation that breathes new life into them. That's why we keep searching, not just for gold or glory, but for the moment when myth and history lock eyes, and we realize they were the same thing all along. So tell me, which legend won't let you go? The one that creeps into your thoughts when the lights go out, or the one you secretly hope is still out there waiting to be found? Drop it in the comments, because the next great discovery might not start with a shovel or a satellite. It might start with you. Beneath layers of desert sand or locked away in museum vaults, some objects refuse to let history rest. They hum with inexplicable energy, carry whispers of tragedy, or simply defy every law of science we try to impose on them. Take the Dybbuk box, a wine cabinet said to unleash havoc on anyone who opens it, its owners reporting night terrors, sudden illnesses, even financial ruin. Or the Benin bronzes, their intricate metalwork forged with techniques modern metallurgists still can't replicate, each sculpture allegedly infused with the voices of ancestors. And then there's the Baghdad Battery, a 2,000-year-old clay jar housing an iron rod and copper cylinder that, when filled with vinegar, produces a measurable electric current. Was it an ancient electroplating tool, a medical device, or something far stranger, an experiment lost to time? What binds these artifacts together isn't just their mystery, but their uncanny ability to unsettle. The Hope Diamond's bloody lineage stretches from the mines of India to the French Revolution's guillotines, leaving a trail of suicides and ruined lives in its wake. The Blarney Stone, kissed by millions for eloquence, may have been a medieval sarcophagus lid, its true origins swallowed by centuries of whispered legends. Even modern relics like the Voynich Manuscript's botanical riddles or the pulsating hum of the Tao's mystery in New Mexico prove that the line between artifact and enigma remains razor-thin. But here's the chilling truth lurking behind every cursed object. Their power often lies in what we project onto them. A mere statue becomes cursed when linked to a king's violent downfall. An ordinary dagger turns sinister when rumored to have tasted royal blood. Archaeologists call it agency theory, the idea that objects absorb the intentions and emotions of those who wield them. And once that narrative takes root, it's nearly impossible to erase. Case in point, the infamous Anguished Man, a painting said to drive viewers to madness, yet scientific analysis reveals nothing unusual in its pigments or brushstrokes. The curse, perhaps just the weight of expectation pressing down like a ghostly hand. So what's next? We're just scratching the surface. Hidden in vaults and private collections lie relics with stories that could rewrite history or unravel the sanity of those who seek them. A sword forged from meteoric metal that glows faintly under UV light. A carved jade mask that emits subsonic vibrations, inducing trances in anyone who wears it. A clockwork doll found in a pharaoh's tomb, its gears moving despite no mechanism to wind it. These aren't just objects, they're question marks hammered into the bedrock of what we think we know. And one of them might already be calling your name, but that's a tale for another time. Until then, keep your eyes open and maybe sleep with the lights on. Because some mysteries don't stay buried, they wait.